Good morning, Veritas scientists. Today is Friday, May 22nd, 2020, but this was actually the lesson from Thursday, May 21st, 2020. I just wasn't able to get my videos to upload, so I'm doing it today. All right, so today we are learning about, in science, we're learning the 8 phases of Earth's moon. So the question from was now Wednesday. It would have been the last lesson because today was supposed to be Thursday. The lesson from Wednesday, May 20th, is this. There are 8 phases of the moon, meaning it can have 8 different shapes throughout the month. The 8 moon phases always go in the same order. What causes the different moon phases? And these are some examples of the phases, how the moon looks different at different times of the month. So there are 8 phases. Whoops. And today we're going to answer this question. What causes the different moon phases? Okay? So we're going to have to first learn some vocabulary, and then we're going to get into it. All right, so number one, notice I already made a video, but I had some trouble, so I had to start again. Okay, so crescent is an adjective. That means it describes something, and in this case, it's describing the moon, a crescent moon. So crescent is describing the moon. So it describes the shape of the moon when it's less than half of a circle. So a crescent moon is less than half of the circle. So if this red is a circle, half of it is there. Notice how this crescent is less than half. It could be really, really small, like a sliver crescent, or it could even be a little bigger than this, but it has to be less than half of the circle. That is the definition of a crescent. So it can look this way, or it could look that way, but those are both crescent moons because they're less than half of the circle, right? If half of the circle was like this, it's less than half. If half of the circle was like that, it's less than half. So that's a crescent moon. Okay, number 2 is gibbous. Gibbous is also an adjective. It describes the moon. So gibbous describes the shape of the moon when it's more than half of a circle. So crescent, less than half of a circle. Gibbous, this is probably a new word for you. Gibbous is more than half of a circle. So if you can see the line here in the middle, that's half, right? Half of that shaded in, and then more than half is shaded in. So anywhere beyond the halfway point, if it's shaded in any more than that, even a little more than this, all the way until it gets all the way colored, that colored in, anywhere between half and being a full moon is called a gibbous moon. Okay, so it can look this way, where like here's the circular part. If this was half, then that's a little bit more than half, right? It can go even more being colored in. As long as it's not a full moon, then it would still be called a gibbous moon. Same thing here. If this was half, then this is more than half, and it could even be like all the way out, kind of looking like that, would still be a gibbous moon. So as long as it's more than half of it is colored in, then the word that we'll use to describe it is gibbous. Okay? Here's some 2 other adjectives. So waning is an adjective that describes when the light that's reflecting off the moon is getting smaller or less. So the word waning means getting smaller. So I'll put that kind of here. Okay, so when it's waning, it's getting smaller. The amount of light that we can see is getting smaller when it's a waning moon. Now, waxing is also an adjective that's the opposite of waning. It's when it's getting bigger, when more light is shining from the moon as every day goes on. Okay, so waxing describes when the light that's reflecting from the moon is getting bigger. So let's look at waning. It's getting smaller, right? It starts as a gibbous, and then it gets smaller into a crescent, right? See how the amount of light, the black part here, is getting smaller. That would be a waning moon. Waxing is the opposite. It's when it's getting bigger. It starts as a crescent, and then it gets bigger to a gibbous. Okay, there's more light. So waxing would be getting bigger, more light showing. Every day it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. When it's waning, it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller every day. All right, so now let's go to the 8 phases of the moon. Okay, first phase is called new moon, and you can't see it at all. I'm going to show you in a few minutes why we can't see the moon when it's a new moon. You can't see the moon. It's there. Even if it wasn't a cloudy night, you can't see the moon. Okay, I'll tell you why in a little bit. I'll show you why. The second phase is called a waxing crescent. So waxing is always going in this shape, this way, like this, right? And I'll teach you tomorrow how to remember the difference between waning and waxing. But a waxing crescent is like this, and then you're going to notice that it's a waxing crescent because it's getting bigger. See how the next phase is bigger, and then the next phase is even bigger than that, and then the full moon is the whole thing, right? So when it's waxing, it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger until it gets full. Then we start waning. It gets smaller and smaller and smaller until we get back to where we can't see it again at a new moon. Okay, so new moon, waxing crescent, first quarter. Now this used to be confusing to me, because you're going to say, well, that looks like half the moon, right? It's half of what we can see, but remember that the moon is actually a sphere, right? It's a three-dimensional circle. So if you were to look, the moon is actually a sphere like this, right? So when we look at it, it's half of what we can see, but it's really a quarter of the whole circle, right? You can see half of it, but we're only looking at one side of it. The other side has another half as well. So when we can see this much of it, that's really a quarter of the moon, because you get one quarter here, one quarter there, and then the back has the next quarter, the third and the fourth quarters, right? So it looks like half, but it's really a quarter of the whole moon, because the moon is actually a big sphere. All right, we'll get into that a little bit more in a few minutes. Okay, so after the first quarter moon, we have a waxing gibbous, right? It's still getting bigger, and it's a gibbous because it's more than half. If that's the halfway line, it's more than half. Then the fifth stage is a full moon. We all know what a full moon looks like. You can see this whole circle. But again, that's really only half the moon, because the other half of the moon is in darkness behind it. Okay? The sixth stage is called a waning gibbous. Now it's getting smaller, right? It was full moon, and now it's smaller than that, right? So it's waning, it's getting smaller, but it's still more than half, so it's gibbous. Then we have the third quarter moon, right? If that's the first quarter, this is called the third quarter. It's, again, you can see, looks like half, but it's on the opposite side of this because it's getting smaller. It's still waning. That light went from full to gibbous to a little bit less. Now it's exactly what looks like half, but that's really called the third quarter moon. And then the last one before we go back to new moon where we can't see it is a waning crescent. It's waning because it's still getting smaller, right? Got smaller and smaller and smaller. And it's a crescent because it's less than half of the circle, right? If this was half of the circle, that's less than half of the circle. And then we start again at new moon, and it goes in the same order. Waxing crescent, first quarter. Waxing gibbous, full moon. Then it starts waning. Waning gibbous, third quarter. Waning crescent, back to where we can't see it anymore. So notice how it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it's as big as it can get. Then it gets smaller and smaller and smaller until it's back to where we can't see it anymore. All right, so that's how it works. There's 8 different phases, but sometimes people say there's 9 phases because then it ends up back to the new moon. So I always call it 8 different phases. All right, so let's keep it moving. Give yourself some snaps. If you already know these words, like waxing getting bigger, waning getting smaller, crescent less than half, gibbous more than half, then this should be pretty easy for you. Those words are tough though, so they'll take a little bit of practice. Okay, let's read some facts. Facts. The Earth is a planet, and the moon, so the Earth and the moon do not give off their own light. They do not give off their own light. And you're all saying, well, what about the moon? It shines light on us every night. The light that we see from the moon is actually a reflection of the sun's light. That's what number 2 here says. The light we see from the moon is a reflection of the sun's light. The moon does not give off its own light. No light on the moon. The light we see is actually the reflection of the light that's being shined by our star, the sun. Okay, so the moon doesn't give off any light. It only reflects the light. The light we see is reflecting off of it from the sun's light. All right? And number 3, the shape of the part of the moon that we can see lit up depends on where the moon, Earth, and sun are positioned. Okay, so these different phases depend on where the moon, the Earth and the sun are positioned. But it's really has to do with where the moon is compared to the Earth, because the Earth and the sun, you know, we move around the sun once a year, and the moon moves around the Earth once a month. So this is something that happens once a month. So it's really the position of the moon compared to the Earth and the sun. Okay, so I'm going to show you this in a minute, but I'll just show you a little diagram. Okay, the moon takes a whole month to go around the Earth one time. And that is why we see the different moon phases. And I'm going to show you using a flashlight in a minute. So if the Earth is here and the sun's way over here, that means the light is shining this way onto the Earth. Okay, this side of the Earth, it's daytime because it's in the sun. This black side, right, if it was like right down the middle. This side is dark, it's night. This side is day. Okay, we learned that the other day, right? The light shining here, this is a shadow, you can't see it. So the moon isn't directly behind the Earth. It's not like in the way. It's actually kind of up here a little bit, right? So if you could picture the sun is shining this way, it's nighttime here. So if you're looking at the moon, the light is hitting this side of the moon. Let me get my red side. This side of the moon is completely lit up by the sun that's shining on it this way. Where this side of the moon is in a shadow. It's completely dark. So when the moon is actually over here, the Earth is in the middle between the sun, the Earth, and then the moon, right? That's when we see the full moon, because the sun is shining on it. The whole side that we can see, this side, is being shined on by the sun's light. Okay? But then as it begins to move, that full moon, after the full moon, is a waning gibbous. It's going to get smaller. It's going to start waning. The amount of light we can see is waning. It's getting a little smaller because now the sun is only shining on this, but since it's moving, the amount that it's shining on is getting less and less and less. And now I'm going to show you this side. Okay, these ones in the middle I'll have to show you with the light and the ball in a second. But now here's the moon over here. When the moon is on this side of the Earth, right, sun, then the moon's in between the sun and the Earth. The sun is shining this way. So this part of the moon, closest to the sun, is lit up. And this side of the moon, where closest to Earth, is in complete darkness of the shadow. So we're looking from the Earth at the moon. Look at what we see. We see nothing because the sun is shining on this side and there's complete darkness on the side that's facing us. So when we look out, that is a new moon. It's there, it's up there in the sky. You can't see it because what we see is actually a shadow. All right, and then the moon continues to move, and then we can see a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. It's waxing until it gets to a full moon, and then when it starts moving this way, a little less, a little less, a little less, a little less, it's waning until it gets back to where we can't see it again. That's a new moon. We can't see it because we're looking at it and it's in a shadow. This side, it's a full moon because we're looking at it this way, and the whole side that we see is lit up. That's a full moon. Okay, so this side would be a new moon. We're waxing, it's getting more and more and more and more light until it's full. Then it's waning, it's getting less and less and less and less and less light until we can't see it at all, and that's called a new moon. Okay, so let me show you this in real life. Okay, let me go shut the light off because we need darkness down here. Still gonna be a little bit of light coming in, but we'll do our best. Let's see. Okay, so, whoops, sorry. Okay, so here's my sun, my flashlight. Okay, there's the sun. Here's the Earth. And this little ball with the smiley face on it is the moon. And remember I told you that the smiley face, the same side of the moon, is always facing Earth. As it rotates around the Earth once a month, that smiley face is always facing the same side of Earth. Okay? So when the moon is here, we're on the Earth, we're looking at the moon. The side that we're looking at, you can tell right here, is in complete darkness. You can't see it. It's a new moon. This side of the moon is all lit up but we can't see it because we're over here. And we're looking at it this way, and all we can see, you can see this whole face is in darkness. That's a new moon. Can't see it at all. Then, as the moon continues to go this way, all right, we're going to see more of it because now the light's going to be hitting this side of it, so we're going to see just a little bit. You can even see right here. If you were looking there, see how the line is like that? You can't see most of it, but you can see a little crescent right there, right? If we were looking from here to here, that's the part of the earth we can see, just this little crescent sliver on this side. Okay, and then it gets more and more and more, and you get to here, and now look. About half of it's lit up. We're looking at it from here, we're going to be able to see the first quarter moon because half of what we see, half of this side that we see is in darkness, the other half is in light, and we can see what looks like half of the moon to us. That's really the first quarter. Then the moon continues, it gets more and more and more and more light. Remember, it's not completely behind the earth, it's kind of up here a little bit like this. So now, look at the moon. If you're from the earth looking at the moon, the whole face is lit up. Right there is a full moon. We're looking from the earth. You can see the daytime on the earth and the nighttime in the back of it, right? And then look up at the moon. It is completely shining. That is a full moon. What? The sun, and then the earth, and then the moon's on the other side of the earth from the sun. So the earth is right in the middle, and then you can see that the light is shining on the whole moon, and we can see the full moon. Okay, then it continues to go this way, and the amount of light being shown on it starts to wane. It starts to get less and less and less and less and less and less and less until we're back to here, where we are looking at the moon, and there is absolutely no light. You cannot see the moon from the earth at all. It is a new moon. You can't see it. And then again, it happens all month. It goes like this. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It gets waxing, 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 waxing until you see the whole thing. Full moon. Then it gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. It's waning, 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 waning until we're back to where you can't see any of the moon at all. And we're back to a new moon. All right, pretty cool stuff if you ask me. All right, now we can't see, so I gotta go turn on the light. Hold on. We're almost done. Lots of kids' toys here. I'm down the Cape. Okay, here's a question I want you to think about. We'll go over these tomorrow. Okay, so number 1 says, look out of your window tonight and find the moon. Part A, what vocabulary word can you use to describe its shape? So think of the vocabulary we had today. What word can you use to describe the shape of the moon tonight when you go outside and look at it? All right, and part B, how can you tell if the shape of the moon is waxing, getting bigger, or waning, getting smaller? And we will find out tomorrow. So this is really just a guess. You probably don't know this, and that's okay. I want you to try your best guess. How can you tell if it's waxing and getting bigger or if it's waning and getting smaller? And it has something to do with the order of the phases of the moon because they're always in the same order. All right, and that's it. Have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye.